First story. The Last Whisper of St. Mercy Hospital. I never meant to go there. The rumors about St. Mercy Hospital were more than enough to keep most people away. But curiosity, they say, is a dangerous thing. I was just another stalker, drawn to the abandoned places, hunting for anything that could make a good story or a quick profit. The twisted history of St. Mercy was known by most. Built in the 1920s, it had a dark reputation even back then. Patients vanished, unexplained deaths, strange whispers in the hallways at night. By the time it was closed in the late 80s, no one wanted to be caught anywhere near it. I arrived in the small town of Red Ridge, about an hour outside of Boston, late in the afternoon. The air was thick with that familiar tension that comes before nightfall. The hospital loomed in the distance, its shattered windows and cracked stone walls barely visible through the overgrown trees. My heart raced as I approached the entrance. There was a strange calm around the place, too quiet, a chilling feeling I couldn't shake. I pushed through the rotting wooden door, the air stale and cold. My flashlight flickered as I walked through the long, empty hallways. The smell of mold and decay was overwhelming, and I could hear the creaking of the building as if it was alive. I moved deeper into the hospital, the silence around me thickening with each step. Suddenly, I heard it, a soft, almost melodic hum. It was coming from the end of the hallway. My instincts screamed to turn back, but I couldn't resist. I had to see what it was. As I reached the source of the sound, my flashlight landed on something strange, a figure hunched over, its back to me. It was a girl, or at least it looked like one. Her long, dark hair covered her face, and her hands were moving in a strange, rhythmic motion, almost as if she was weaving something. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. The humming continued, growing louder, more distorted. I stepped forward, and that's when I saw it. Her skin, pale, almost translucent, was peeling off in patches, revealing something far worse underneath. The flesh was rotting, crawling with small black insects that squirmed and writhed. Before I could react, she turned. Her eyes, they weren't human. They were hollow, empty sockets staring directly into mine. And then, a voice, soft and breathy, whispered from her cracked lips, "You shouldn't have come here." The ground beneath me shifted, and I stumbled back, heart racing. The hum turned into a shrill scream. The walls seemed to close in around me. The figure slowly stood up, her body jerking unnaturally as if she was no longer human, but something else. Something far worse. I turned and ran, my flashlight flickering in the darkness. The hospital seemed to stretch, endless hallways leading me in circles. I could hear her behind me, her footsteps dragging along the floor, getting closer with every step. I didn't stop running. I didn't dare look back. But just as I reached the door, I felt something cold wrap around my ankle. I screamed, trying to pull away, but it was too strong. I fell to the ground, the flashlight rolling away from me, casting erratic shadows on the walls. And then I saw her again, her face twisted in an expression of pure malice. She whispered once more, "You're not leaving." The last thing I remember was her reaching out for me, her fingers cold as ice, and then everything went black. They found my camera the next day, lying in the grass outside St. Mercy. The footage was strange. There was nothing but static and the sound of heavy breathing, followed by a low whisper. No one ever found my body. Second story. The Clown's Lair. It was supposed to be just another dare. A few of us, the usual group of thrill seekers, decided to explore the abandoned circus in Wyndham. We'd heard the rumors, of course, how the place was haunted by something worse than ghosts. But we weren't the types to let fear dictate our actions. We were the kind of idiots who laughed in the face of danger, unaware that we were about to face something far worse than what we could have imagined. The night we ventured out, the air felt wrong. A thick fog had rolled in, enveloping the streets of Wyndham like a deathly shroud. Our group, consisting of me, Adam, Sarah, and Kevin was ready for whatever horrors awaited us inside. We'd been to abandoned factories, old hospitals, and other forgotten places, but there was something about the circus that felt different. We arrived just as the last vestiges of daylight faded, casting long, eerie shadows over the decaying tents. The place had been abandoned for years, but the memories of its twisted past still hung heavy in the air. I could hear faint echoes of what seemed like distant laughter as we stepped inside. The main tent loomed in front of us, its faded stripes now barely visible in the dim light. Adam led the way, his flashlight cutting through the dark, illuminating the cracked walls, rusted cages, and broken equipment strewn across the floor. "Come on, it's just a circus," he said with a nervous laugh. What could go wrong? That's when we heard it. A low, grating sound, like the squeak of old shoes on concrete. The laughter again, but this time, it was closer, much closer. "Guys, did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. We all froze, the air growing heavier, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then it moved. A man, or what had once been a man, with a face twisted into a grotesque grin. He wore a clown's outfit, stained with something dark. His eyes glinted with madness as he shuffled toward us, his movements jerky and unnatural. "Run!" Kevin shouted, but it was too late. The clown let out a high-pitched laugh, and from the darkness, more figures emerged. Clowns, dozens of them. Their faces were warped, their smiles too wide, their eyes hollow. They were all moving toward us, laughing in a chorus that chilled me to the bone. We ran, but the building seemed to twist, its layout shifting with each step. I could hear the clowns following us, their laughter growing louder, more frantic. We stumbled through the maze of tents and old carnival booths, but no matter where we went, there was no escape. It was as if the circus itself had become alive, trapping us in its nightmarish grip. Adam was the first to go. We heard his screams echoing through the tents, followed by a sickening silence. We dared not go back to find him. Sarah was next. She was yanked into the shadows by a pair of long, bony hands, her screams swallowed by the thick fog. Kevin and I kept running, but the laughter was everywhere. We could feel the clowns closing in, their twisted forms lurking just beyond the light of our flashlights. We were being herded, corralled like cattle, and no matter how fast we ran, there was no escape. Finally, I found myself alone. Kevin was gone, disappeared into the dark, and I had no idea where I was. The circus had swallowed me whole, and I was now a part of its twisted history. I could hear the clowns, their laughter still echoing in my ears. But it was no longer just laughter. It was a voice, whispering my name. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back outside the circus. But everything had changed. The once dead tents were now vibrant and full of life. The clowns stood at the entrance, grinning at me with their too wide smiles. I tried to run again, but I couldn't move. My body felt wrong. The last thing I remember hearing was the same voice that had whispered my name. It was calling me to join them. And I did. The circus wasn't abandoned. It never was. And it's waiting for the next group of fools to come play. Just like we did. Third story. The echoes of Wyndham. I never should have come to Wyndham. The town itself was just a speck on the map, a forgotten place swallowed by time. But the old asylum on the outskirts, that was what drew me in. Locals called it Blackwood Asylum, a crumbling corpse of a building that had been abandoned for decades. Rumors swirled about the place. Patients vanishing, doctors losing their minds, experiments that no one spoke of. But what really got me was the story of the last doctor who worked there, Dr. Elliot Grayson. They found his body in the basement, his face frozen in an expression of unspeakable terror. The police never figured out what happened. The only clue was a single word scrawled on the wall in his blood. Echo. I had to see it for myself. I arrived just past midnight, the asylum looming over me like a sleeping beast. The iron gate was rusted and broken, so slipping inside was easy. The air smelled of mold and decay. My flashlight beam flickered over peeling wallpaper and shattered glass. Every step echoed through the empty halls. Then I heard it, a whisper. Not wind, not rats, a voice. I spun around, scanning the darkness. The hall was empty, but the voice continued, low and distant. A single word repeated over and over. Echo, echo, echo. My blood ran cold. I followed the sound, my footsteps growing hesitant. The whispers led me down a staircase into the basement. The air was damp, the walls covered in something dark. My breath came fast as I reached the door at the end of the corridor. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the room was empty, except for an old, rusted chair in the center. Chains dangled from the ceiling. On the far wall, barely visible in the dim light, was the word "Echo," scratched deep into the concrete. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I spun, my flashlight flickering. The whispering grew louder. The room was freezing. My breath came in ragged gasps as the light dimmed further. And then I saw him, a figure in the corner, just beyond the edge of my beam. His limbs were wrong, too long, too thin. His face, oh God, his face. It was stretched, skin pulled tight over hollow eyes and a gaping, twisted mouth. He didn't move, but the whispering did. It was inside my head now. Echo, echo. I stumbled back, hitting the rusted chair. The thing stepped forward, its movements jerky, unnatural. I tried to scream, but the sound was stolen from my throat. Then, something even worse happened. It mimicked me. It moved exactly as I did. When I raised my arm, it did the same. When I backed away, it followed. Every twitch, every breath, every horrified step, it mirrored me perfectly. And then, in a voice that was almost mine, it whispered, "You are the echo now." Darkness swallowed the room, and I became him.